An unknown old man is unexpectedly brought into the hospital in a coma. A pigeon kept showing up in the room to sit on his bed. After unsuccessfully trying to banish the bird, one of the doctors noticed that the bird had a small tube around its leg. He was certain that this must contain the answer to why this pigeon kept showing up. When he was finally able to read the message hidden inside the tube, the doctor knew he needed to get the police here to help immediately. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. The pigeon settled down on the man's bed again, cooing and preening. This gave the doctor time to sneak around the animal to quickly close the window it had entered through. He was not going to let it fly away this time. Now, he just needed to capture it to figure out why it kept coming back here. It was quite the struggle, and required the help of several nurses and a lab coat used as a net. But the doctor eventually managed to get hold of the pigeon. He removed the tube it had fastened around its leg. Inside was a small piece of paper with a message written on it. When the doctor read it, he immediately understood what was going on. With this new information at hand, the doctor knew that he was far out of his depth with this situation. He called the police, knowing they would have the resources and expertise to handle the situation with this unknown old man. But who was this old man really? Why was the pigeon visiting him every day? And why did the doctor get the police involved? Even before the pigeon arrived, the man was a strange case. He had been brought into the hospital in critical condition one night. The doctors and nurses in the emergency room did everything they could to save him, working their asses off to stabilize him. Although he was now stable, it was difficult to determine what had caused the man's bad condition. It very likely had something to do with the man's old age. Even at a guess, he had to be somewhere close to 80 or 90 years old. However, the staff had no way of confirming this. When he was rushed into the emergency room, the old man had no ID or anything on him. Apparently, a bystander had seen him collapse in the street and called an ambulance to come pick him up. It was possible he hadn't been carrying a wallet or ID at all, or it had perhaps been lost in the process of getting him to the hospital. To make things even more complicated for everyone involved, due to the man having severe brain swelling from his fall, the doctor had decided to put the man into a coma until the swelling went down. For the time being, the man remained in his medically induced coma, labeled a John Doe. The day after he was admitted, there was a lot of debate among the hospital staff about how to handle the situation. With no name, address, or next of kin, they had no way of knowing the man's medical history or medical needs. While discussing possible plans, they heard some commotion coming from the old man's room. One of the nurses rushed into the room to check on the man, worried he had unexpectedly woken up. Such a thing should be impossible, but stranger things had happened on the emergency ward. What she wasn't expecting in the slightest was to see a handsome gray pigeon strutting along the comatose old man's bed. The pigeon didn't seem panicked or distressed in any way. In fact, it seemed almost at home there on the bed, despite all the tubes and wires around the man. To the nurse's surprise, she saw that the window was barely cracked open far enough for the bird to fit through. It would have had to really made an effort to get in, but why would it do such a thing? Even in her confusion, the nurse knew one thing. It didn't really matter how the pigeon had got into the room. It couldn't stay in there. Who knew what kind of diseases it could be carrying? A hospital was no place for street vermin. The question now was how she was going to get the pigeon out of the room without it freaking out and possibly pulling out the wires, keeping the old man safe in his coma. Closing the door to the room behind her, the nurse opened up the window as far as she could, then prepared to start chasing the pigeon out. The bird cooed and fluttered about, evading her grasp, but thankfully not snagging any wires. It took a few attempts, but she eventually managed to chase it out the window. She closed the window once the pigeon was outside, checked on the patient, and then went on with the rest of her busy day, quickly forgetting that the pigeon incident had ever happened. However, it would definitely not be the last time she saw the bird. In fact, this particular pigeon was about to become a notorious visitor of the hospital. The next day, the situation regarding the unknown old man changed a bit. After checking with the higher-ups at the hospital, the doctor in charge of the John Doe had managed to secure a week of free bedtime for the man whether he woke up or not. After that, if he still wasn't in a condition to be taken out of the coma, or if he was still unknown, they would revisit the situation and see if there was another hospital that could take him. The doctors estimated that the man would need 3 days in the induced coma to allow the brain swelling to reduce. That would, hopefully, give him 3 or 4 more days to recover and find some next of kin to contact. Until then, the old man would be kept under observation. However, something else was watching the man too. Since the nurse had not discussed the Pigeon incident with any other staff members, somebody on the morning shift cracked open the old man's window again. Sure enough, the next time someone went to check on their mysterious patient, the strange pigeon was on the bed again. It cooed softly, fluffing its feathers as it stared at the nurse. The nurse couldn't believe how bold the bird was, and she was certain it was the same one from the ring of black feathers around its neck. She tried shooing the pigeon like she had last time, but this time the bird apparently didn't care. Instead of fluttering to the window, it flapped up onto light fitting above the bed and refused to move. The nurse ended up having to call security in to help her remove the animal. Following that incident, other hospital staff started hearing about the bird. Rumors and theories started circulating about why it kept visiting the old man. There was a sign made for the door of the room instructing to keep the window closed at all times. However, staff would continue to see the determined bird. The pigeon took to sitting in front of the closed window for hours, staring at the old man in bed or pacing up and down the window ledge. When staff tried to close the curtain in an attempt to drive the bird away, the pigeon instead tried to fly through another patient's window to get into the building. It was quickly caught and removed again. But things were getting out of hand. More and more people in the hospital heard about the bird, and some came by the room in search of the fabled pigeon. Many curiously pondered about what it was doing here. Finally, at the end of the 3rd day trying to get rid of the pigeon, somebody spotted an interesting clue. Why was the bird so obsessed with the old man? Since the pigeon had spent so long sitting on the window ledge, people were able to get a very close look at it. One of the doctors, intrigued by the pigeon, noticed something fastened to its leg during his lunch break, a small closed tube often used to transport items or messages. Certain it held vital answers, he decided they had to catch the bird. The staff, now fully invested in the mystery, brainstormed how to capture the pigeon. Since the room was on the 3rd floor, it wasn't as simple as stepping outside. The only option was to open the window again, hoping the bird would return. When they tried, the pigeon flew in immediately, settling at the comatose man's bedside with surprising ease. The doctor, cautious not to startle it, inched closer. The pigeon seemed unfazed, preening in its usual spot. Admiring its calm demeanor, the doctor carefully shut the window to prevent an escape. Realizing he'd need help, he called a nurse, and together they planned to catch the bird. With a deep breath, the doctor lunged for it, triggering chaos. Equipment toppled, and their commotion drew the attention of nearby staff. Startled, the pigeon darted into the hallway, prompting shrieks as it dodged people left and right. The doctor and nurse chased after it, rallying staff and even patients to join the search. Just as it seemed the pigeon would escape again, a triumphant "got it" echoed down the hall. A patient had caught the bird near the man's room, holding it firmly as it squirmed to break free. Relieved, the doctor secured the bird and removed the tube from its leg, eager to solve the mystery. Opening the tube, he found 2 pills and a neatly folded note. Skeptical, he assumed it was a harmless prank until he read the note. It simply said, "The daily doses," with no further details. The pill's purpose and why they were delivered via pigeon remained a baffling mystery. The hospital staff clustered around the doctor, brimming with curiosity about the mysterious pigeon that had appeared carrying pills. The doctor, unsure of what the pills were, decided to seek help from the pharmacist and figure out what to do with the bird. Until then, the pigeon was placed in a small cage, content for the time being. To understand the situation, the doctor interviewed the nurse who had first seen the bird. She explained that the Pigeon arrived shortly after an unidentified comatose man was admitted. What puzzled everyone was how the bird could pinpoint the exact window of a hospital room without being a domesticated pet. The doctor theorized someone must have monitored the man and sent the bird as a messenger. While it seemed far-fetched, pigeons were historically used to deliver messages. The critical question was, who would send medication to an unconscious patient? Determined to solve the mystery, the doctor enlisted the hospital's security team to review footage. The security staff eagerly accepted, as incidents like this rarely happened. Reviewing 2 weeks' worth of footage, they discovered the pigeon had consistently visited the same window at the same time each day. It had flown directly into the room without fail. Despite these findings, the doctor still couldn't fathom the purpose of the pills or why they were delivered to this specific patient. The pharmacist's examination of the pills revealed they were heavy narcotics, highly addictive painkillers typically prescribed to trauma patients. As the pieces came together, the doctor began to suspect the previous patient of the room was behind the strange deliveries. Staff members confirmed the prior occupant had a history of manipulating nurses into providing strong medication during his frequent hospital stays. Due to his behavior, he was eventually barred from having visitors. Realizing the pigeon had likely been a drug mule, the staff surmised the man's dealer continued sending medication, unaware the patient had been discharged weeks ago. With no other option, the hospital contacted the authorities. A few days later, the doctor learned the previous patient had been arrested. He faced numerous charges for related criminal activities and was held without bail. Meanwhile, the comatose man finally regained consciousness. The doctor, thrilled by the man's recovery, decided to hold off on recounting the bizarre story until he was ready to speak with his family. After all, how would anyone react to waking up and learning about a pigeon drug ring involving their hospital room?